And we got through, I don't know, we've been through 4 or 5 pages now. And we got through the outline. You might keep that handy. And we even got through the first point of the first main thesis or proposition of the hey Philip, of the essay, and that was the first thing we have to consider. It is a fact that men are not equal. Okay, and remember, oh boy, there's a trigger right there, because what do you mean? Of course, all men are equal. This, what kind of bigoted, racist, xenophobic comment is this? Well, remember, the Bible's clear, and we can see this. Yes, we are all equal in terms of our sin and our need for a Savior. For those who believe, we are equally saved by the love and mercy of Christ. But within this world, we have different gifts and abilities, and the Bible testifies to this. It's not wrong to say that, no, we are not all equal. We're not all automatons that have been stamped out of the same mold so that, you have the same gifts and the same talents as I do. There's things that I do very well. There are things that you do very well that I don't have a clue. For example, you're an awesome chess player. I'm not. And other things. And we, and it's ironic, isn't it? That the same people who will crow about diversity and the need for diversity and how different we are the same ones who say, oh, how dare you say that we're not all equal, in terms of, all just the same ability or something like that. I mean, it is true. Black, white, Asian, Caucasian, Hispanic, Germanic, whatever. Yeah, we're all equal in the eyes of God. There's no one race that's better than the other. Now, that is bigotry. But again, that's not what Walther's talking about. Because remember, the premise of socialism is that what? We're all equal and we're all going to do the same thing or whatever. And then everybody's just going to, get the same thing back. And, it's this kind of idealism which is never really attainable. And Walther makes that point. Because we're not equal. People, and look, check it out, in socialist and communist countries, is there an elite that lives high on the hog at the expense of everybody else? You bet there is. And, that's not real communism. Right. Okay, or any socialist country, right? There are always going to be people, and even if you, and I think he uses the example that, okay, even if you pay everybody the same, there are going to be some people who are going to hang on to that and try and use it in a different way than people who just want to go out and spend it or do whatever, So he doesn't really get into it, but I wonder if this isn't part of what communism and socialism has to do. They have to make sure that everybody is so impoverished that guess what? There's really nothing that you can spend your money on or hoard that's going to be of any value to you, because we don't want you doing that. We want, in communism and socialism, they truly do want to keep you beholden and obligated to the regime or to the government, and that is kind of a reality. Now you can say, well, yeah, but look at the socialist nations of Europe and how wonderful they're doing. Okay, well. I'm not sure that they're as wonderful maybe as we might idealize. All right. And even if they are, that doesn't mean that's the way we should necessarily want to go. All right. So we're moving into the second point of that first main thesis about these efforts of socialists and communists are contrary to reason, nature, and experience. Therefore, this is the bottom of that page, I don't know, 5th or 6th page. We say in the second place, it is a fact that men are naturally selfish. And okay, I will let Walther talk here, but that very statement is contrary to what most people think, right? Or actually, most people might think, yeah, you're selfish, you're a jerk, but not me, I'm a good person, all right? And so, and of course, we as Lutherans know all people are naturally selfish. Those little babies, right? You moms and dads, right? Those little babies, why are they waking you up in the middle of the night? Is it because they care so much about your sleep? No, it's because they're selfish little beasts who want and need to be fed and nourished. Or maybe they're just being ornery too. And we are naturally selfish. You say, well, yeah, but those little babies, they don't know any better. Well, they know what they need and they want it now. And they think that that's what this world is all about, providing for their needs. And of course, if we aren't careful in how we raise our children, we can raise selfish little brats that will be poor citizens and kind of icky people. So we need to be careful in how we, and of course, the Lord himself knows this, and this is why he disciplines us through his word, so that that natural selfishness is stripped away. Love God, love your neighbor. That takes away our selfishness, our self-directedness. Because remember, that's what sin is, right? It literally means a turning in on oneself. So you could also say that men are naturally sinful too. All right. So the communist must admit that men will indeed never peaceably suffer themselves to be reduced to equality. They must be forced to it. But it would be contrary to their own principles continually to force people to submit to these new arrangements. The paradise which they would establish would then be a perfect hell. The social relations would become worse than ever. Man is selfish by nature. One whose heart has not been changed thinks of itself first. Such a person will say, I comes first, and then I comes another time, and then my neighbor may have a bit of a chance. Man's heart is naturally full of envy, ambition, and avarice. These are all wild beasts which abide in the natural man and which the communist will never be able to control with his new social arrangements. Men are not satisfied with just what they need and more with just what they need and more than the necessities of socialists could never give. No, the majority of men want more. Yes, they want a great deal, and the more they obtain, the greater becomes their desire for riches. If one has gained a small amount of wealth, he is like the man who drinks the water of the sea, which never quenches his thirst, but increases it and makes it more scorching. Okay, already, what an observer of the human condition Walther is. And of course, how can he say these things? How does he know these things? One, by observing it, right? But, they could read the newspaper and hear about crimes and see what was going on in the streets, just as we do. There were brothels, and there were gambling houses, and there were unwed parents and babies, and there were abortions. All the same horrible stuff going on today was going on. They knew about it. It wasn't like they were living in this pristine time. And so he could see it, but also, how does he know for sure that men are selfish? Human nature, but I say human nature is good. I think humans are wonderful. We just haven't tapped into that wonderful, pure, ability of man to be good. We just have to make life better here. Then man will be good. Well, how does Walther know that's not the case? Because the Bible says so. Because God says all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. No one's righteous. All seeks after his own glory. The Bible reveals this. So Luther not only sees it, has experienced it, felt in his own flesh, but he knows this because the Word of God reveals it. Yes?
Well, and they also have the testament or example of, is it Martin Stephan?
Okay.
Or the original bishop?
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
They brought the original founders or settlement that would become the Missouri Synod Lutherans over, and he kind of resigned in disgrace because he was their bishop. And it was kind of, they saw what he did, and I lost track of the whole list of the degree of, or the scandalous things that he did, but he resigned the office in scandal.
Did he resign or they just kick him out? I always thought they booted him. Maybe he did resign, but
I've lost track what it was that happened.
You might be right. Martin Stephan, yes, he was the pastor and bishop of the Saxons who came over that would eventually become the Missouri Synod. Remember, it was for religious freedom and from religious persecution that we came over. Our forefathers came over from Saxony and settled here in Perry County, Missouri, down on the banks of the Mississippi. Well, guess what? Southern Missouri on the banks of the Mississippi, you can almost guess what that's like. Hot, buggy, miserable. They were not wise. They did not have the greatest land. They were going to turn to farming and be like the Amish, basically. Didn't really work. Most of them were educated city folks who didn't really know what to do. They should have moved to the city where they could use their vocations, to benefit their neighbor and to have income, et cetera, et cetera. But they were trying to set up this little enclave where they could be sort of isolated from the spirit of America. They were afraid of this American freedom and individualism, revivalism, so they're trying to kind of insulate themselves from that. So they settled in Perry County, and this Martin Stephan, Walther adored Stephan, looked up to this guy, trusted him, and Stephan was very charismatic. And as sometimes happened with charismatic leaders in the church, sometimes they are babe magnets. I don't understand that. I've never experienced that, thanks be to God. But he ended up having a number of affairs, or at least was accused of having a number of affairs, as women were coming forward to confess their dalliances with the bishop. Now, it was somewhat scandalous that any of this came to light, because it came out through confession. Should not, so how do you deal with that? It's a tough thing. But anyways, Stephan always swore there was never any wrongdoing. The other thing that he did do, on the ship over, he had the people turn over their wealth to him. He became kind of he said, well, look, I'm the bishop, you should trust me. I'm the father, so he convinced them to turn over their goods to him and gave him control. And what really got people was that they were doing all the work, building him a house, hauling in crates of wine and different things, to support his somewhat lavish lifestyle. And they were out there sweating and getting, bugs and bitten up, and it was not nice. Tyler?
Excommunicated on grounds of misconduct and embezzlement.
And what?
Embezzlement.
Okay. Pardon me? Yes. Yep. So he was excommunicated and removed. I mean, he may have resigned, but it was because he was excommunicated. And they literally sent him across the to the Mississippi River to the other side, to get rid of him. So good call there, Jeremiah. So Walther saw this firsthand. And he's a bit of a prognosticator, and I think he even mentions it in the first section. But, what would happen in 1517 and these places where, communism and socialism took over? It was by force. It was not peaceful revolution. It was literally, gathering people up and killing them, or taking their property and sending them off to Siberia, or again, just flat out killing them. And that's pretty consistent, this rule of terror to force people into this, but people are complying. Yeah, because if you don't, you die. It's better to comply and live than it is to die. Although our forefathers, what's that? Better be read than dead. I'll tell you a little story. So back in the day when I was at Iowa State, I had access to a button making machine in this little warehouse, or in this little we called the workspace. It was a cool little shop, and you could do stuff down in the shop and work on things. They had a button making machine. So I was bored one day while I was working, and so I made a little button that said "Better dead than red," and then I made another little button that said "Peace through superior firepower." And on the one button, I did it in these kind of funky, 60s sort of pop letters, and I drew a picture of a mushroom cloud, but I made it look, kind of like psychedelic, like one of these 60s pop art things. So, and I colored it all up, and I put it on my flight jacket, because I was wearing my flight jacket at those times. I was kind of a proud former Marine and aviator and stuff. And so I had this is a peace through superior firepower, and then it looked like a kind of a 60s, sort of peace thing. And now, granted, this wasn't the 60s, this is the mid 80s. But I had some people go, "That is such a cool button." And then they'd read it and they'd go, "Wait." You know, you're sick. You're sick. But anyways, yeah, you know, what's some of the Camden flag, right? Join, is that live free or die, or join or die? I don't know. There's some of those. Some of our founding fathers had the idea. Better to live free and independent with New Hampshire's, okay. You know, than it is to succumb to this kind of tyranny. But anyways, so yeah, it's by force, and then each regime has to oust the others, or you live by the sword in order to keep control of your power, and you have to keep the people down, or else they will rebel or revolt. And here's the other thing, and Walter doesn't mention it yet, but here's the thing. You know, what is it that makes people good? And it's not the opiate of the masses the way Marx referred to it. It is religion. I mean, it is Christianity. You know, as a Christian, you know, you learn to love and be content and to take care of your neighbor, not by force, but by the love of God, right? The gospel prevails. So what they're trying to force can never succeed. But the gospel, which is not forced, which is given by gift from God, causes this love of man. And that's why, you know, it's ironic that, you know, I think that the communists, they know that Christianity, which is contrary to their religion of social, you know, humanism or whatever, and social Marxism and all that stuff, actually needs what Christianity provides. But the freedom that Christianity expects and gives, they can't abide by. So they have to force it. And so in some ways, communism and socialism is truly of the devil, you know, in many ways. All right, but so can unbridled capitalism. I get it, you know, where people are taking advantage of the poor. That's bad too, don't get me wrong. But where there is freedom and mercy and the love of God, yes, people can live lives of both prosperity and love for their neighbor. Okay, so pressing on. It is a truth which no one can deny, dreadful as it is, that man is naturally selfish. And a selfish person will not be made equal with others unless those with him or with whom he is to be made equal are by far his superiors. All those who are in favor of the new communist regulations for society are in favor of them because they expect to have their conditions improved. After considering your own experience with men, ask yourself whether you believe that many would be found who would consent to the new regulation of things, if they knew that they would thereby reduce their present circumstances. No. With the exception of a few fanatics, only those would consent to such regulations who expect to improve their condition by doing so. This is the reason why the communists can attain their desired ends in no other way than by the shedding of blood, by murder and arson. Well, I mean, you know, okay, it does beg the question, though. Maybe we should be doing something to help people improve their condition, right? But, you know, on the other hand, that improving should not come through violence. And I think we are seeing some of this, right? I don't know if it seems like the riots and things have kind of toned down. I don't know how things are going out there in Chicago and on the coast and different places. But I think that what's happening with Black Lives Matter might parallel this in some way, right? That they want to improve what they consider the inequity of their situation, and they feel the only way they can do it is by forcing it on others and taking what they feel that they are not receiving or deserving of. Maybe something like that. And I think that's why Black Lives Matter it is a socialist organization at its core. You know, so I think there are some parallels here. But, you know, again, as Christians, you know, we should listen and say, okay, why do you feel you need to be doing this? It's obviously not right. We cannot condone it. And you know, we can't also, you know, we have to keep in mind that, you know, just giving people what they want isn't going to help anybody either. Because like we said, selfish people, hey, give me some of that, now I want some more. And if I can get it from you without having to work for it, all the better, right? So this kind of plays in. So I think those who don't really want to take responsibility for their own actions, and force this control on other people, this is a very desirable system. But we don't want it, and it's contrary to Christianity. All right, so continuing, whenever they have aimed to accomplish anything practical, they have resorted to these means. The introducers of these ideas saw at once that there was no way of accomplishing their purpose except by striking off the heads of their opponents. However, this is evidently frenzy, for although they should strike off the heads of thousands, yes, of millions, new opponents to this system would continue to make their appearance. How much blood had been shed for this cause in France already during the first revolution in the last decade of the past century? Okay, now remember, this is 1874, somewhere in there, 79. I think it's 79. And so he's referring to the 1780s and 90s of the first French Revolution. How this was already at root, or those roots go back that far, and of course that bloodletting of France, where they just marched people to the guillotine, killed them for no good reason. Blood flowed in streams. The beginning was made with the king. He had to be beheaded, together with his wife and daughters. They next turned upon the bishops, the priests, the wealthy, and the most eminent ministers who had formerly assisted in ruling the land. But what was accomplished? It matters not how much blood had been spilt. Thousands and thousands of secret enemies were only waiting for their deliverance from this reign of terror. Is it not terrible that those who would make the entire world happy by the establishment of a paradise must begin by shedding streams of blood? Everyone not of their opinion is put to death, and frequently with the most terrible tortures. And of course, this is true, right? This happened in France. It happened in communist Russia. It happened by the Khmer Rouge, in Cambodia, Laos, in Cuba, also I can't remember if I mentioned communist China, and of course one of the worst, North Korea. This is all done by force and threats, and not by any real love or compassion or freedom. And again, these people, they think this is their only resort. They think they've been forced into it. And it is a question of wanting to take what others have. I think that this is something that we're seeing in our nation, both by the riots and the looting. Just a couple of weeks ago, the Miracle Mile in Chicago was looted. They actually, the next weekend, they closed down. I don't even know how you do that. Close down Chicago, block all the roads, and keep people from going in and out. That's part of this. I think a lot of those looters don't have any serious political agenda. I think they just want to, get some freebies, and if they could go back and watch basketball or, do whatever. I don't think there's any real political agenda that they're trying to accomplish other than take advantage of a situation. I think they would like to get free stuff from other people. I think they'd like to have other people pay for their lifestyle and stuff if they could, but who wouldn't, right? It really does take an act of the will and an act of God, to be honest, to overcome this selfishness, and I think that's a real problem. I think there is a growing sense in our nation that the government, see, here's the thing, and I think, not to get, I'm not trying to pick at any political party, because I think they both have their problems, but, our government was not based on the government taking care of everybody's needs. That was never the purpose of the United States or the Constitution. That I'm going to provide you free. The government's here. Hey, Big Papa, the government is here to to provide housing for you, to provide food for you, to provide clothing. You just sit back and relax. Let everybody else take care of you. Is that what the United States was founded upon? No, we know it's not. That's not it at all. Instead, it was founded on the freedom to be able to pursue those things. The freedom to be able to live and earn and work and provide and do, provide something for a neighbor, get something in exchange. Yeah, take care of people. There's nothing certainly weird to do that. As Christians, we're called to do that. But that's not the role of government. It's just to allow us to have the freedom to do that. Yeah, Tyler.
Because they kind of go against Paul and how Caesar is meant to bear a sword.
Yeah.
Sorry, but bayonets and gunpowder makes very poor farming.
This is true. This is true. In fact, I just read this today. Actually, I was reading. I pulled a couple of books off my shelf that I don't know about you guys. I'm kind of strange maybe in this. Other areas too, obviously, but in this in particular, I will grab books even if I'm not necessarily ready to read them right now. I'll think, oh, someday I might want to read that. So I'll grab books. And so years ago, this was actually at seminary. Some pastor had either retired or passed away, and they take the libraries and they'll donate them to the seminary. And so, like in between classes, you'll go to like the common area, and there's a whole bunch of books. And if you're lucky, you'll get there before the other guys have had a chance to look at them, and you can grab up some real treasures. And thankfully, I wasn't into what a lot of guys were into, so I found what I thought were some interesting books. And a couple of them were on the Constitution. There were a couple of books on the Constitution, on Miracle at Philadelphia that kind of describes the whole constitutional, how it all came together. And, pretty interesting stuff. Now, I'll admit, I haven't read them very closely. I always intend to, and someday I probably will. Like I got a book probably 20 years ago sitting on my shelf, and this summer was a good time to read that book. So I got it read. But it was there. But anyways, I was just reading in the Constitution some of the comments where Jefferson said that the important thing about having a militia is to protect, and the right to bear arms is to protect the citizens from a tyrannical government. That's why we bear arms, so that the government can't tyrannize us. And that's something to keep in mind. Because remember, one of the first things that Marxists, socialists, and communists want to do? Get rid of your right to bear arms. And remember that. What is it that socialists, Marxists, and communists want to do, and potential tyrannical governments want to do? Take away your right to bear arms. So there are certain political figures that's high on their agenda. And of course, remember how they do this. Oh, it's to protect you. It's to protect you. You need security, so give us your guns. Has anybody read 1984? Yeah. I mean, I don't know that that's exactly used in 1984, but that's very Orwellian. To gain control by lulling you into a sense of peace, right, by the government. We need to be aware of this. And of course, there is a growing fascination. Forgive me, I'm digressing again. But, Marxism is based on this need to take over the schools and indoctrinate the kids. And guess what? This has happened in the U.S. The schools have been taken over by well-intended people, but people who are operating under a Marxist ideology without even knowing it.
It was, I think, Lincoln who said, the one who controls the fastest this generation controls the next generation.
Yeah, and guess where he got that? From his German Marxist advisors. Lincoln had German Marxist advisors. Lord have mercy. And there's truth in that. It works both ways. But what have we done? We've allowed that to happen. And because of that, we have generations of young Americans who have not been brought up in a love for our nation or for our Constitution or for the history of our nation and what makes it great. They have been taught that we are evil, that our Constitution is flawed, that the whole thing is based on systemic racism and a flawed premise, and it all needs to come down. I mean, that's kind of where we're getting, and I think that people are duped. They've been duped into thinking that, hey, this socialist, the socialist utopia is what our nation needs, and I know why else would they be pushing for? Why else would they be pushing for a standard wage for everybody in our nation? Oh, it's okay. That just makes sure everybody gets a standard wage. You can earn more, sure. Oh yeah, right. And at what taxation, right? This is coming. All right. I know, not supposed to get political, but kind of interesting. CFW seems to be getting a little political. He's not mentioning parties, but you know what? Back then, I wonder which party he would be part of, right? I don't. It's a good question. I think. Don't know. Maybe you guys would have a better idea, but I don't know that he was a huge fan of Lincoln, simply because of the strong centralized government that the.
Wasn't he criticized during the war, and some people said that why are you just flying the Confederate flag already?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, why don't you have a Confederate flag flying over the seminary? Oh boy, there's some trigger words today, boy. All right. He was not a Confederate. Or Missouri Synod. I would like to know, and I should do some research. Maybe somebody else knows. I wonder if we had chaplains in the Confederacy as Missouri Synod Lutherans. I don't know.
I think it's been a pamphlet with like a soldier's prayer book that I think both sides had.
Both sides had.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know how prevalent it was in the Confederacy, but I think they did print it. It did have some circulation.
Well, I do know. And the guy Quintard he was actually an Episcopalian bishop who did that for the South. He was a Southerner, and that prayer book is really nice. I mean, it's almost Lutheran, because the orders of prayer and the litany and things are the traditional liturgies of the church. He was trying to bring that back in, and that was a very popular prayer book among the Southerners. In fact, I read an account of it. I think it was after the battle. Golly, it might have been Antietam, and it was the next day. They were rounding up the wounded and the dead, and a northern chaplain. I don't know that he was Lutheran or anything like that, but he was saying that he was amazed and really impressed with the piety of the Southern soldiers and the Southern troops that he was dealing with. He felt that they treated him much better than the Northern troops did. Kind of an interesting commentary. Be that as it may. Anyways, okay. Continuing on here. Let's see here. Am I down to is absolutely true? Okay. So it is absolutely true that men are naturally selfish, and this too shows the folly of attempting to help society by means of an external equalization. Help can be secured only by removing selfishness. Then it may be accomplished. But as long as man continues in his selfishness, it is the greatest folly imaginable to attempt to make all men equal in wealth, equal in honor. In France, they even went so far as to say, "No one shall excel the other in education." And to symbolize the idea that nothing but equality should be recognized, all the tall, slender trees had to be cut down. It was already determined that the steeples should also be torn down. For doing this, they might seem to have had some reason, inasmuch as the steeples pointed to heaven, of which they want to know nothing, for they would have their heaven here on earth. Yeah, and this is true too, right? With those who promote socialism, Marxism, notice that those types of people tend to also want to exclude Christianity from the government, from the school, from the culture, from the social stage. They mock it, and this happens politically, even in our nation. It's interesting, yes, in France to this day, I don't think they've removed steeples. I think there's still steeples in Paris. But you can't put out a sign that says, "Here's a church." They've kind of stopped that. So we have a church in France, but good luck finding it. In Paris, we have an LCMS congregation in Paris. I think James Warwick Montgomery goes there. I think he might be a member there. But when we were in Paris, we didn't even attempt to find it. We probably could have, but we didn't. And we thought it would be difficult because we didn't know French anyways. But anyhow, so again, we can't force this. So let me just ask you, we've already hinted at it, and Walter's sitting at it here. What is the only thing that can truly remove selfishness? Okay, death. But in a more immediate application, the word rightly preached. And now that's interesting that you would say it that way, Tyler. Rightly preached. What does that mean? Is it more exhortation, admonition, more sanctification preaching, to do better, try harder? Right. Okay, good. So in other words, preach the law and the gospel from the text. Don't shy away from, we don't want to shy away from preaching exhortation, admonition, sanctification. Those things are necessary, but they must come out of the text. The law must show you your sins. See, you can't be forced to be unselfish. It has to come from knowing what you have been forgiven by God. Then, knowing what you have been forgiven, then in turn, you can turn the other cheek and love your neighbor and not be so selfish, right? It comes from the gospel, the word rightly handed that points you back to Christ. Okay, now he hasn't said that yet, but he's hinting at it. And of course, without that, it is just the coercion of the law. And all that can do is make people even more selfish or smug sinners. That pendulum of, what'd you call it? The pride and despair. Yep. All right. So next paragraph. So should a man, for example, have spent a great deal in learning his profession or trade, and then receive no more pay for his labor than one who can do no more than make use of his strong arms? He would very soon say, I have no intention whatever of connecting myself with the communistic society. The man who simply knows how to use his arms will, of course, say, yes, I would be made perfectly equal with the one who spent a number of years for the attainment of his proficiency in his profession or trade. If all were true Christians, they would say, I am not working for money at all, but because God has commanded it. My daily bread I expect to receive of God, since he has given me the promise that if I labor faithfully, he will never leave nor forsake me. The true Christian alone is of this mind. The natural man thinks, on the other hand, why shall I labor when there is nothing to be gained by it? How many merchants say, why shall I keep this or that article of goods, for there's no profit in it, whether the goods are in demand or not? Is not the question, because they are serving only themselves. And thus we find it in every station of life. This is the selfish principle of the natural man as he is born into the world. Okay, agreed, right? So we as Christians, we work certainly to provide for our family, because remember, your children are your neighbors who need you. They need a roof over their heads. They need clothes, a good education. But a worker deserves his wages. And yeah, not everybody has the same abilities. I'm thankful, for what the gifts that God has given me. I may not make $1 million, being an athlete or, a star lawyer, or something like that. We have our vocations, and yeah, we can learn to be content in them and take joy in them. Hey, I would imagine that there are plenty of garbage men, who love what they do. You know what? I get to drive around a big truck. I get the satisfaction of knowing that I'm keeping the place clean. And you know what? I get to go home at night, and I don't have to worry about anything. I park my truck. There's more to it. I don't mean to belittle or oversimplify the garbage man. And also the great satisfaction of knowing that, hey, a garbage man, I hope, understands what a wonderful blessing they are. Because if there was no garbage men, think of what this city and our nation and this world would be like. Or the guys who keep the pumps running at the sewage plant, or the janitors who empty the garbage cans. Those are noble callings. They probably aren't paid enough for that. So again, the Lord gives us these various gifts. He gives us our reason and senses to use to love our neighbor. And we benefit from that, and so do they. Not to abuse or take advantage of our neighbor, but provide for them. So yeah, you can be a merchant, you can be an attorney, you can be a doctor, you can be a garbage man, you can be a car salesman, whatever you want. You can use the gifts that God has given you and take joy and comfort in knowing that you're helping your neighbor. But you also have the freedom to earn. There's nothing wrong with that. Jesus does not criticize wealth. He criticizes those who love wealth more than him. There's a difference. The problem is the rich person in selfishness without the word of God just wants to accumulate more wealth. That's where the problem comes in. All right. Selfish principle is a natural man as he is born into the world. So if then there is to be any help for the world, the people must become Christians, as said above. There's no other way. There are, however, many thousands of people who are called Christians, but who are not such. The communists see this and then exclaim, "What Christians? Why, they are the greatest scoundrels on earth." We must admit that it is even so, that there are many scoundrels among those who bear the Christian name, who are not worthy of the name. But when we speak of Christians, we do not mean those who simply have the name, but those who do not only believe in the Bible, but who in their life manifest and carry out the principles contained in the Bible. These alone are Christians. And if all were such Christians, we would have heaven on earth, and the cross, which we must expect, would be easy to bear. Of course, no communist will believe this, because he does not know the meaning of the term Christian. He only sees the faults and sins of those who call themselves Christians and perhaps also attend church, and then exclaims, "What? Christianity shall improve the world? Are not the Christians worse than we?" And alas, we are forced to say, "O wretched communists, you are indeed fearfully offended, and woe unto him through whom this offense comes. For he hardens you and causes you to believe the more firmly that Christianity amounts to nothing. But it remains true after all that men are naturally selfish, and they will remain selfish until they become true Christians. It is therefore madness to think of creating a world in which everyone is satisfied to have no more than others." Agree? Disagree? I think so. One of the things I love about reading Walther, going back into this, and I bless and thank whoever translated these things into English. We have a wealth and a treasure of theology from our forefathers going back to Walther. And, it's largely been lost in our synod. I heard a scandalous thing this past Sunday. I was talking to one of our visitors, and they informed me that they and again, this could just be hearsay, and forgive me if I'm just spreading gossip, but I believe it, that they knew men who were coming out of the St. Louis Seminary who sat at the feet of the seminary president who taught homiletics. And the seminary president was Dale Meyer. Dale Meyer, you know that name, right? What's he famous for besides being seminary president for the last 20 years or so? He was the Lutheran Hour speaker, along with Wallace Schultz back in the 80s and 90s. And he had a very good reputation for being an amazing preacher. Well, he's not. I've heard him preach. And I don't know what happened to him, but he... I've heard him preach several times here in the district. Gave a presentation at our district convention, 6 or 8 years ago, which was atrocious. It was a chancel drama that was so full of glory and just theatrics. But anyways, and if this is wrong, I repent. Somebody can set me right, and I'll repent. But from what I've seen in my experience and now heard, that this, in this class, and maybe it was just an isolated thing. I hope it was. But, when I went through seminary, we were expected to read and reread regularly Law and Gospel, Walther's Law and Gospel. And what I heard was that in his class that wasn't required. You could read it if you want to, but it wasn't required. Lord have mercy. It is that right handling and dividing of God's word which has set our churches apart. That distinction of law and gospel. And it's that preaching of law and gospel that accomplishes exactly what Walther is saying is necessary here. Christians who, yes, understand their sanctification rightly under their justification. And, if we're just going to preach the law, which is so ear-tickling, and you guys have come out of this, right? Where it's just, do more for Jesus. How much, and you too, Rita, and how much do you love Jesus? Show it to him. Do this, do that, and that just heaping on of the law, just to pummel you into pride or despair. That's kind of what Walther's also getting at here, and it just amazes me how 180 years ago or whatever now. No, not that long. Can't do the math in my head. Oh well. What is it? 1880, 140 years. 140 years. That 140 years ago, that Walther could, and it's a bit stiff maybe compared to modern, English, but it's also translation. It wasn't, that somebody did for him. But these words are so profoundly, applicable today, and we do well to heed them. He was a man who knew the Word of God. He knew our sinful condition, and he wrote brilliantly. All right, and he's right, and we should take this to heart. We do not want to give offense to the unbelievers through our actions. We don't want to be the cause of hardening hearts because we take our Christian liberty for granted, or that we act like hypocrites. I'm not saying that we have to wear white beanies and wear denim skirts. If you happen to be a Christian lady, or that as a Christian guy, you can't have a beer with your buddies once in a while or something like that. But our mouths should not be filthy. Our actions should not be disgusting. We should not give offense as Christians. We are in the world but not of it. And so we should not be the cause, because of our reckless behavior. And, even with the mask wearing thing, I'm not going to tell people to wear masks. I'm not one to wear one, everywhere in my car or on my bike or something like that when I'm not around people. I'm not going to go that far. But, there is an obedience to the fourth commandment, even when it seems a little ridiculous at times, and we don't want to risk giving offense. Now, granted, one of the things that I am definitely going to be encouraging, pushing for, and praying about, and I hope our congregation is willing to consider these things. I do want to soon reintroduce the chalice. I also want to get us down to every other pew, which is just under that, arbitrary, 6-foot mandate. It's almost 6 feet. I want to get us back to that. I know that might sound, kind of scandalous. I don't want to give offense. I don't want to harden hearts. But in the freedom of the gospel and in the desire to get people to be able to receive God's gifts and to come to church more easily, I think we can do this. And again, we're not trying to go against the world or whatever, be rebels or something like that. But at the same time, we must obey God rather than men, and we want to be able to do this in a correct way. Now, what Walther's talking about here again are those hypocritical Christians who really do not live the faith out at all, who call themselves Christians and give Christians a bad name. But we all need to be aware of this, and for example, I don't think this was an offense, but a number of years ago, I probably told you this, one of my favorite pictures is after a Winkle Actually, it wasn't a Winkle. It was after one of our study groups. A couple times a year, we head down to Hessen House. And so we went down. This is probably about this time of year. It was probably for Reformation or something. We headed down to Hessen House, and we got a big table. There were probably 9 of us. Back when 9 could get together and not sit 6 feet apart. And it was around lunchtime, and we all had big mugs of beer, and except for Kenning, he doesn't like beer. He'd rather have whiskey. Okay, I hope you didn't hear that. But anyways, so we're sitting there and we're kind of like, hey, and Pastor Post, myself, Pastor Stogdill, a couple of others, Pastor Kenning I think was there, and so somebody posted that, and it got back. The district president saw it, and his comment was, well, I hope that wasn't before noon or something like that. I think he was just joking. I think he was just joking. But again, there would be Christians who would take great offense at that. That, your pastors are allowed to drink beer. They would do that in public. And so, and definitely we did not want to be sitting there all afternoon swilling down beer so that, we're carrying each other out to our cars and drive home drunk. That would be horrible. That would be very inappropriate. That would give offense, and rightly so. Anyways, I'm rambling. All right. But these words do apply. And so we need to be aware. So continuing. So we must not imagine that many who are very wealthy would be satisfied in having no more than others. To illustrate, there's a man who is worth $10,000, $100,000, $500,000, or even $1 million. Would he accommodate himself to such a communistic society and become a member? The communist Fourier, or however you pronounce that, Fourier, died 1837, attempted to carry out his communism in France, and even succeeded in gathering together here and there little communistic congregations, which he called phalansteries, okay, stresteries, whatever. There, 1,800 to 2,000 persons lived together, having all things in common. There were no rules except the so-called distributors. For someone has to give the command, so much belongs to you and so much to another. This is your work and that is his. But alas, money was wanting. Fourier then published a request in the papers that some wealthy person should, out of love for mankind, contribute $1 million for this purpose. He, Fourier, would go to a certain place every day to see whether so kind a man would come. He went to the place every day for 12 years, but no one came. All his phalansteries became bankrupt. Well, there's a practical application of the theory, right? That proves the rule that men are selfish. Yeah, I'll give you $1 million so you can, here, take my money. No, again, as the Bible says, if you don't work, you don't eat. So these communist gentlemen, or communistic gentlemen like Fourier, are either fanatics or swindlers. We will readily believe that the leaders are mostly fanatics, because having nothing more to do with Christianity, they have asked themselves day after day, what can we do to elevate the deeply fallen world to happiness again? And they have devised this plan. But what can it accomplish? People are not made happy, but unhappy by this means, and as the communists continually call the attention of the people to the dreadful condition of this world, they also more firmly fix the idea in the minds of the people, how wretched is the world, oh, how unhappy, we must take another course. This is the poison with which the communists feed the people. This is the poison which is all the more dreadful in its effects, because we know that the condition of the world will remain the same. And if 1,000 communistic papers would be published, they could not turn the world upside down. They cannot change the condition of the world. What do they gain? No more than this, that people feel that they are unhappy. If one who is poor thinks, I am poor and cannot follow the pace set by the rich, yet I will not care, but be contented with my condition, if I can only make an honest living. He is happy or he is a happy man, as poor as he may be. Okay, I'm going to take a verse out of context here, but remember Jesus said the poor will always be with us. Okay, this is not to turn a blind eye or a deaf need to the ears of the or a deaf ear to the needs of the poor. But what Walther is saying here is that, by this form of government, and you do see this, right? Okay, I'm poor. I don't have any way of getting unpoor, so I'm going to take what I think I need, and I'll take it from the rich. It's a kind of a Robin Hood syndrome or something. We romanticize Robin Hood. But here's the thing. Yes, we do need to take care of those who are unable to take care of themselves. And this is where it all kind of started, right? That, okay, there are people who are unable to work. They're in a social situation where they can't find work. There's no education. Well, what's going to help them? Let's get them education. Then they can start, okay, I get that, fine. But, what happens when you give away an education? What, there's a, okay, I'm going to pull something out of not Disney. Who's not DreamWorks. Who's the one that does all the great Pixar? They do all the great movies, although their latest ones haven't been all that great. But from the Incredibles, when everybody's super, or how's it go? Nobody's super. See, when everybody, so, if you take an education, say, hey, I'm going to give you a free education at Harvard. I'm going to give it to everybody. Everybody gets to go to Harvard for free. What does that do to Harvard? What does that do to the thought of free education? Does it elevate it? No, it cheapens it. And that's like in Saudi Arabia. I don't know if it's still true, but back in the day, after OPEC and all that oil started making vast amounts of money and people were just giving scads of money, what were they doing with their cars? Instead of fixing them, they would just abandon them. Hey, I don't care if that's a $60,000 car, $100,000 car. I get that much a month from my dividends from the oil that so I'll just go buy a new one. I mean, it makes people wasteful. Again, so you think, oh, this is great. Just the government should provide and give all this stuff, but no, you can't make people happy that way. It ultimately, again, doesn't allow people to be content. People need to find contentment in their vocation. Now, again, we also need the ability and the freedom to strive and achieve. If I want a better job, yes, I shouldn't be hindered in finding one. And of course, this is where equal rights and stuff comes in. I get that. Nobody should be told you can't, hey, you've got the qualifications, sorry, you're of a certain gender, or you're a certain color or a certain nationality, sorry, you can't work for us. I get that. We do need to have that freedom. And to be content in whatever abilities we have. There was a, never mind, I won't bring it up. We're running long as it is. All right, so that ends the second sub point. Again, Walther kind of fleshing this out. I think very interesting stuff. Very applicable to today and the situation we find ourselves in. These things haven't changed. It's just, in fact, I would say the inroads have gotten deeper and more profound in our nation. So we'll continue next week with point 3. It is a fact that happiness does not consist in external advantages. All right, so we'll pick up there. And any final parting thoughts or comments? Yes, Jeremiah.
So you were going back to the question on the free education comment.
Right.
A lot of our problems with just managing our education costs are coming from the fact that the cheapening or free access of student loans is screwing with the supply-demand metrics so much that there's been nothing on the demand side to drive down or the cost, because they've had an abundant supply of, quote, cheap upfront money that, it's that mentality is part of why there's the crisis we're having with student debt. And they're actually, and I saw this even in the past couple of days, the reality of the insane costs from the free access of money is starting to come home to roost with this push towards online college universities where maybe things will, I don't know, maybe things will start correcting on that, but.
Yeah, I mean, there's always unintended consequences, right? Things that we don't expect. You know, and you know, I know some of you guys, you know, you're not even thinking about college, right? And we sort of gone through this thing where, oh, everybody's got to go to college. You know, so okay, so my parents, so you know, I'm the first one to have gotten a college degree in my family. I think my brother did beat me out, but my brother, but none of my parents or grandparents had a college education. You know, that was not that, you know, there was anything wrong with it or something like that, but that just wasn't expected. And you know what? You got a job, you had a vocation, you made a living, you raised your family, everything was good. And then this need now and this push, because again, there's this idea that education is going to solve all of our problems. Get everybody a college education. Well, I tell you what, there is definitely grade inflation. I know there is. I've seen it. I mean, my daughters, God bless them, they're smart young ladies, they're not stupid. But they had like 4.25 averages. I mean, they were in classes where they were getting 125%. I'm sorry. How does that work? You know, and it's because they were good, diligent students. But you know, there is this idea that hey, everybody gets an A. Everybody needs to get, and of course, the colleges are motivated to do that, right? Because if they say, hey, all of our students are 4.0. You know, or all of our students, you know, graduate, you know, with honors or whatever. Look at how great our education is. Well, in reality, what are they doing? They're just lowering the bar, right? Lowering the bar. Now, I don't mean to take anything away from my daughters, but I also know from what I've heard from my daughters, particularly my youngest daughter, what she was getting locally at DMAC, it was a indoctrination into socialism, pure and simple. Those classes were atrocious. The teaching that she received. It was feminism, it was socialism, it was tolerance, it was all of that stuff and more. And you know, so if you're going to college, you need to be aware of this. That's what you're going to be fed. You know, unless you're maybe going to a really, really good conservative school. Even then, who knows? And you know, and like you said, with the cost, you know, as the market gets flooded. You know, people with BAs, BSs, you know, whatever, bachelor's degrees, as the market is flooded with that, guess what happens? And by the way, you're paying, so the market's flooded, the value of the degree is going down, and even if the cost of the degree stayed the same, the value would be much less. But what's happening? The gap is getting so wide. You know, kids these days are coming out of college with the debt that in my day would have been a postgraduate doctoral education to be a PhD or a medical doctor. And so these kids are coming, you young people are coming out of debt. Pastors, see, this is a huge problem with our pastors. You know, we've got so many young pastors who are coming out of seminary with $100,000 or more in debt. And you go to a rural congregation of 50 people, you know, or maybe 80 people if you've got a dual parish, and you know they're trying to pay you. You're never going to get, and you're trying to raise a family on that. You know, you're never going to get that debt paid off. Yes, this is a huge issue. Yeah. I mean, it is still very possible to raise a family, you know, with one working spouse. But you have to be willing to make some concessions in your lifestyle. I mean, it doesn't mean, and hey, we've done it on a pastor's salary. And you know, I've been compensated fine, you know, and I'm not complaining. But it did, you know, where do we take our vacations? You know, we go to Grandma and Grandpa's and stay for a couple days. You know, although in the recent years we've been a little more extravagant, you know, but for years and years and years, where do you go? Oh, they have free rooms for pastors up at Camp Okoboji. Guess where we're going? Up to Camp Okoboji, you know, and we're going to stay at Grandma and Grandpa's on the way, you know, and for years my daughters thought it was this incredible thing that when we got to Okoboji, you know, our family's full of little rituals, right? I'm sure you guys are too. We would give our daughters a $5 bill and say, go buy whatever you want. What? $5, that's nothing. And now I'm thinking, oh my gosh, so I've been trying to make up for it a little bit, but I mean, you make do. You have one car or maybe two not so nice cars, or like us, we're driving a Sienna, a 2003 Sienna. No, actually, it's a 2002, I think, 2002 Sienna with 265,000 miles on it. And now I'm like, yeah, let's keep this thing going. I want to see if we can break 300,000. It's like, see, we've made it to the moon, right? Isn't the moon about 250,000 miles away? So now we got to make it back. I would really like that Sienna to make a round trip. Yeah. I don't know that we'll do it. It's getting a little rattly, but you know what? It does start on time. Juanita, you need to go, and that's fine. Yep. And so let's pray the evening prayer, and then Juanita can go home and fall asleep in peace. All right. I thank you, my Heavenly Father, through Jesus Christ, your dear Son, that you have graciously kept me this day. And I pray that you forgive me all my sins where I have done wrong, and graciously keep me this night. For into your hands I commend myself, my body and soul, and all things. Let your holy angel be with me, that the evil foe may have no power over me. Amen. All right. Well, we'll see you either Friday morning at 10 for Bible study or at Sunday at 9.